Good evening, everyone, and welcome to this, the sixth session in our current affairs TV show. We've been through loads and loads of stuff already about money, banking system, and a whole raft of other topics. And we're now onto a very interesting subject this evening, which is: are we educating for a bygone era? So I've got some fabulous guests on with me this evening, and I'm going to start off by introducing them, and then I'll give you the running order of what we've got scheduled to talk about this evening. Apologies for the late start, we had some technical issues, but I'm going to go straight across now to James and Sarah. Come and say hello.
Hello.
Hello, Chris. Thanks for having us on the show.
You're welcome. How are you guys? All right?
Yeah, we're doing well. We're doing well.
Fabulous. Okay, and you're are you near where we're broadcasting from, or have you sailed up the canal somewhere?
Yeah, we're always in a different place every time we talk to you, mate.
Okay, all right, great stuff. All right, well, welcome to the show. I know this is one of your subjects that you love very much, so hopefully we're going to hear some really interesting things from you this evening. Neal, come and say hello.
Evening, everyone.
So how you doing, Neal? You all right?
Yeah, good. Busy day. Just got back from organisation of a climate march, so on to the next big project.
Fabulous stuff, fabulous stuff. And Nadine, come and say hello. Nadine is a business in the community connector on secondment from Lloyds Bank, working for 12 months in the community, helping to link up businesses and charities and community sector organisations so that we can have more good stuff happening in the community. So, hi there, Nadine. How are you?
Hi, Chris. I'm good, thank you.
Thanks for joining us tonight. I know we had a few gremlins earlier.
That's right. And I'm still recovering from a Hindu weekend, so you're lucky you got me 9 o'clock on a Monday night with a hangover.
Oh, plenty of water there on tap, I hope.
Absolutely.
Fabulous. Well, thanks for coming on the show and joining us. Right, tonight we've got a really good, a really interesting show lined up for you. Of course, education is vitally important. The people that we're going to essentially hand over this the reins to are the next generation. And like I always say to students when I speak to them, people of my age have messed it up royally, and we need you to come along and sort it out for us. So we've got, but we've got some challenges in this area of education. So the education system, is it still educating students for a world that no longer exists? Has the world kind of moved on, but we forgot to do something about the education? That's a really interesting topic we'll start off with. Then we'll move on about how the internet is changing everything. Learning online. I remember as a child I had the access to the Encyclopedia Britannica. They went belly up a little while back now as everything's online, so massive change through that technology introduction. Learning what interests you rather than learning by rote. This is another interesting topic, and I know Neal's been doing a little bit of work on that in the background. He's going to share with us. Problem solving and creativity is what this world needs right now, not a whole load of facts and figures that are available through a mobile phone. Are league tables focusing us on the wrong things? Are they focusing us on pitting child against child and competition, as opposed to encouraging them to work together and collaborate to solve challenges that we've got in the world? And do league tables focus us on the process rather than on the people that are in the education system? Is education creating competition, not collaboration? Is it promoting winners and losers rather than we can all win and we can all come out of this with our self-esteem intact? Is it promoting ego and inequality, or is there something we can do about that within the existing system? And are we, with tuition fees and stuff like this, just creating a whole debt scenario and sending our young people out into the world with shackles around their ankles before they even get started? So we're going to aim to get through all of that lot. Loads of interesting discussion coming up for you. So I'm going to get straight onto it, and I'm going to go straight to James and Sarah first. Is the education system still appropriate for the modern world?
Yes. Surprisingly, which but allow me to elaborate. It's a perfect reflection of the type of society that we have. Lots of people are advocates of educational reform, rightly make many astute observations and criticisms of the education system, but they divorce it from the social system. This is the big problem. They don't see that one's a reflection of the other. And so it's going to come back to bite us on the arse, that's for sure. You know, with jobs going the way that they're going now, which we discussed with technological unemployment. But really, I would say that in a sense, it fits the sort of 9-to-5 slave mentality that we have going on out there, and which I'm sure the powers that be would probably like to have continue. So an education system where you're not taught how to think, how to learn, how to think critically, and given the tools to do all of those things, is perfect for people who will go out and gladly accept increasingly shittier conditions and crappier wages to work longer hours. So, you know, at jobs that they can't stand, with 80% of people hating their jobs, and so you know, I know I was being a bit facetious with my answer initially, but you can see, hopefully, you can sort of appreciate what I'm getting at.
Yeah, I mean, what you're basically saying there is that if we want to carry on producing automons for a world that was conceived back in the Industrial Revolution, where people sat at benches and did the same old thing day in, day out, then we've essentially got a system that does that very well. But if you want a world of creative problem-solving people who are not going to just follow the system but going to question the system, then what we've got right now, although there are little glimmers in different parts of the education system, in the main it's basically more of the same.
Well, I don't. They're not willing to actually have a root and branch change. They're not willing to change the overall architecture entirely, and most people don't necessarily understand the historical narrative and context by which mainstream education came about. They just thought, wasn't it wonderful that, you know, free education was given to all, like it's some kind of gift or something. They don't appreciate where its roots actually come from, because most people don't know, unsurprisingly. But that's another subject perhaps that we could get into. It's quite broad.
Okay, what are your thoughts then, Neil, on this particular aspect?
Well, I definitely agree there needs to be wholesale reform of the education system, hopefully based on evidence. But just a few examples, obvious examples, why it isn't working is the fact that we've got a shortage of nurses because we're not trained enough nurses. We've got a shortage of doctors. Anyone in engineering will tell you there's not enough people qualified for that. And most people come out of their higher education with a massive amount of debt and have no hope of getting a job in their chosen area. So there's a lot of work to be done.
I mean, is that because people are, I mean, I haven't put it on the agenda as such, but people are going through the school and they're not being directed towards things like engineering or nursing, or what's the cause of, or are they going for soft options like business and marketing?
There certainly is some case of the soft options, and there's certainly some case that people aren't being directed correctly, but this is all couched in a conversation of our current educational system. Whereas what we should do, according to evidence, is teach people to think, teach people to learn. and then actually everything else just flows naturally. There's a lot of evidence around this. We don't teach that.
So Nadine, I'm guessing that you're probably the closest to the education system that we have on the show tonight. You're the youngest person and the last to leave the education system. How do you see this as a younger person?
Yeah, well, I think the biggest issue for me, Chris, is that we don't really set children up with life skills. So we teach very academic subjects which aren't necessarily suited to everybody, and we don't set people up for what comes next. So part of what the Business Connector role is about is working with businesses to understand actually what skills people need when they come into the workplace, and helping schools to develop those skills in kids early on. So that might be things like budgeting, working closely with young enterprise to develop those entrepreneurial skills, get people problem solving, and like Neal said, it's about getting children to think rather than just recite something that they've learned. A lot of the academic piece is just effectively copying something from a textbook and putting it onto a bit of paper. What we're challenging businesses to do is work with schools to get children actually to do the problem solving, to get them to do things like develop products, and almost start mini businesses and that kind of thing, to actually give children a chance to understand what they like before they have to start thinking about what they want to do next. And obviously a huge thing on the national agenda now is apprenticeships. So rather than pushing school leavers into higher education such as university, actually looking at more vocational skills. So in Watford where I work, there's a huge skills gap in terms of the retail jobs, the construction jobs, so all of the jobs that are coming up with the investment at the moment, there just aren't the skills coming out of the schools, and it's working with the businesses to look at things like apprenticeships to give people the opportunity to develop the right skills.
I mean, it's an interesting topic, because in the previous session we talked about the the declining nature of the job market, i.e. that as we move through through the next few years, technology will begin to erode fairly seriously jobs. So are we by focusing on? I mean, right now, okay, it might be appropriate, but like by focusing students on potentially saying, well, what kind of job do you want to do? Should we be changing the rhetoric and saying, what kind of life do you want to be living?
Yeah, absolutely. And actually, I think it's about multi-skilling people. So actually, it's about giving people more than one route, and not just saying, it's retail or, it's construction, but actually giving people core skills such as leadership, such as problem solving, and getting them to appreciate, I guess, the life bit of their work-life balance. So actually, it's about developing things like passion in people, hobbies, those are the things, and businesses and schools should be encouraging people to have that alongside work, because let's face it, we've got it at the moment, so we have to give people the skills to earn the money, but actually it's about businesses understanding that developing those outside of work skills is really important, not just for people's enjoyment but actually for their well-being, physical and mental. So I think that's really, really important, that we're encouraging that as well, but also that we're making sure that people are multi-skilled. So things like digital skills are going to be absolutely massive. We all know it's going to get more and more a huge part of everyday life, and that's another huge skills gap that we've got. Certainly in the older generations who just aren't equipped to do some of the basic skills. So we need to be making sure that we're upskilling people in that digital space as well.
Yeah, I mean, you brought us nicely, like the link there is onto the internet.
I meant to do that.
Which, of course, is changing everything, and it's got a massive impact on the way people interact with each other, and obviously with digital technology, people networking, finding out what other people are doing, and meeting up with people who like doing what we like doing, and forming mini tribes and stuff like that. So I mean, that the internet is changing everything. And what are your views, James, on some of the things that Nadine said there in terms of the jobs and stuff? I mean, we've talked about that already, but giving those kids the core basic skills of being able to think really gives them the tools to be adaptable and move in whatever way the world moves, doesn't
it? Yes, I think it depends what we mean by well, able to think and adaptable. I suppose there's critical thinking that comes into this as well. There's a big lack of critical thinking in schools. Well, it's not being taught. It's not taught as a subject at all. So people don't know what a logical fallacy is by the time they've left school. So they go online, and we've got all this information out there, and people take their truths from just anywhere they find on the internet, a blog written by a random person or a documentary put up by someone, but they don't really know how to fact check properly. So you've got problems. Yes, you've got problems in the job market, but you've got problems, deeper rooted problems with the social system as well, because, you know, if you wanted a reasonably functional democracy, it's predicated on the people being well educated enough to pick leaders that are capable of capable of leadership, and then if they're not good enough, you get rid of them. But you have a public that's educated to do that. Every single writer on democracy who's ever existed doesn't just say it's mob rule and then people get to vote. They say no. Critical in this is the education of the public to be able to think critically about their social platform. So I would just chuck that in there as well. But basically, I would agree with what's being said, and I'd also say that in a future where we were talking about just how grave the issue is going to become with jobs, how on earth can we actually say to kids what we're preparing you for this future? The future's not the same as it used to be. You used to walk in and say, oh, I'm going to be an accountant and I'll be an accountant for life. Well, you can't make anyone that guarantee anymore. The same goes for lawyers. You can't be a lorry driver for life. We've got driverless cars coming up. You know, what are you actually going to do? And you know, it really does turns the whole issue on its head. The internet really has.
So, what do you think, Neal? I mean, I mean, the old question that you've got at school, and I guess every young person hated this question, was, what are you going to be when you grow up?
Yeah,
well, what a massive question that is for someone today.
Yeah, and if anyone was like me, I didn't have a clue. I'm pretty sure that's most people don't know. I think the people who are really passionate from when they're toddlers and know what they want to do, I feel jealous of those people. But I've actually found my vocation, and now I'm in my 40s. So I would be a massive advocate of whole life learning, basically. So that would include the critical skills, so critical thinking, teaching people to love to learn for the sake of learning, and gaining knowledge. Because once you do that, you can, as long as, and definitely the internet enables this, you could, once you have those things, if your job becomes redundant, you're going to find it very easy to reskill. We need a social system that will take care of you while you're reskilling, and it's not going to make you homeless, because unfortunately that's what happens right now. But so whole life learning, and hopefully people follow their passions. Even if they don't have a passion, let's give them the system via the internet at least hopefully some physical stuff as well, where they can use the skills that they've learned about critical thinking and loving to learn to find something else to do. Because new things will come along. I mean, it's not going to be the same as it is now. We know there's not going to be full-fledged employment anymore. We know that. But so once we get the social system in place that's going to take care of people, it's about following the passion, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, I remember saying back in 1997 that the internet is going to change absolutely everything. And I'm not even sure I understood quite what I said back then, but it's going to, I mean, it is changing everything, but it's literally going to turn every single thing that we thought was, if you like, a structure for the forever, for the future, systems, administrations, organisations, and the whole lot is going to change. And that comes right down to education, because, as James said, if you're going to try and educate, if you're going to educate kids now, almost what you've got to do is say at the end of their schooling, right, you now know, you have the tool set to be able to do absolutely anything that you choose to do, but nothing specific. Now go find what you want to do, kind of thing. I guess we need a bit of that in the Dean, don't we, in Watford? Because, you know, with all the investment going on here, we need a few chameleons, don't we? A few people who can do a few different things, not just a load of, you know, builders, because the building is going to come to an end.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, and a lot of the construction projects are kind of 3 to 5 years, and beyond that, the work may not be there. You know, new projects might start. I guess the real key for me is about empowering people and giving people personal resilience. So, you know, we really need to be making sure that we're building that personal resilience at an early age. And again, I think that's what, you know, programs like Young Enterprise are great for doing, because it's giving children exposure to things like failure, you know, for resolving problems. I think all of those things are great to be building, and actually we can do stuff in business as well. So again, I think, you know, in a lot of businesses, you know, people are following processes and not necessarily empowered to make decisions, to problem solve, to come up with ideas. And I think we can really learn from companies like Google that give their employees a certain amount of time every week to go and do whatever they want that will improve the company. So they're just told you can go and work on any project you like, come up with an idea, and then come back and tell us what it is. You know, so they're not told specifically you have to do X, Y, and Z, and you've got to do it by Friday. And I think those are the companies that we really need to learn from, because that's where we're getting our innovation, that's where we're getting these really exciting new developments that are coming out, and those are the people that are going to come out best, because they're given the time, the space, the support to really learn what works in the new world. And I think those are the skills that we need to be building right from that early age. You know, and I think we've all got a part to play in that, whether we're educators or whether we're businesses. I think we've got to build those skills now.
Yeah, so what you said there is a really interesting thing. What Google are doing, and I had heard about that, is they're allowing people to be creative. They're allowing people the space to play, effectively. And the company is saying, well, you know, like, and an interesting statistic is something like it's well over 50% of Google's products come from those 2 days a month or whatever it is that they allow their employees to play. Most of their new products come from that.
Yeah, absolutely, because they're really, you know, they're saying to absolutely anybody, your ideas are valuable. And I think that's, you know, what we haven't embedded into our culture at the moment, is saying to everybody, doesn't matter what your idea is, it's valuable and we want to explore it. And Google are fantastic at that. You know, and we can all learn from that. You know, whether we're talking to a 5-year-old or a 50-year-old, you know, everybody's ideas count. And we should make sure that we listen to them and allow people to explore them in a way that feels safe for them.
Fabulous stuff. I mean, that brings us on to the next topic, which is about learn what interests you. And the world is full of stories of people who've been written off by the education system, only to then go away and do some self-learning, find out, pick up books or go on the internet, study stuff that they really enjoy, and suddenly they become absolutely world-renowned, or certainly an authority on what they picked up, because, you know, it's like they're focusing on what interests them and their passion. I mean, just one example I'll give you is what the guys who are and they're older people, but what the guys who are planning the rebuilding of the Canterbury Park gates have done in a period of 8 months. When you've got 12 people who are passionate about a certain thing, they have done something which is pretty remarkable, and would have probably taken in conventional systems probably close to 3 years, and they've achieved that in no more than 6 to 8 months, because they're passionate, they're interested, they're going out there and they're working together as a collaborative team to do a task which is very defined, and they all want to see it through. So following what interests you, James, that's got to be the answer, hasn't it? As we become more collaborative, as jobs disappear, we've got to be out there solving problems, things that interest us, and we want to work together with other people who share those passions.
Yeah, true. The thing is, what we're talking about is we are talking after people leave school and now that they're adults and they've got the opportunities to do it. The thing is, the school model is definitely not built to work like that at the moment. When you go to a classroom, you see the kids are sit down, listening to what the teacher has got to say. There's no kind of application. They're not doing any cool project that they need, where they need to use maths and languages or music or arts, whatever, where they can use their imagination, creativity. There's nothing like that. So from the moment where you are 5, 6 years old, due to the system of the model of the school, what happens to those kids? Their creativity is straight away dropped compared to where they are very little. So how can we expect, after all these 12 years of schooling, the majority to do those programs, cooperative? They're lovely. I love that idea. But if you start talking to people about having the initiative to start something, they're always waiting for someone to start, right? And there's a few people, because of what, right? It's because I think, and I think we all agree with it, that the educational system is not based to expose that or to continue the reality we all want in the.
Well, isn't it doing worse than that? Is it not actually crushing it?
Yeah, and the thing is, we telling kids that they actually need to spend more time in school, more hours, doing more things that they even don't like. And then when they get home, they still have to go and do homework. And then they get to school and they've got tests. And then if they don't have the right grades, they're not going to do the things they want to do. So what is this telling us?
Well, I think they're making learning into a chore rather than something to be enjoyed. And actually, asking them, to come out and do what they love, when the whole process you're putting them through is pressure to pass grades because of the competitive economy that they're going out into, and then you wonder why the schools are based upon competition. The very thing that stops you being intrinsically motivated in what you're doing, because you're focused on your competition, you're not focused on actually what you're doing. And the same can be said for grades. Like I was talking about a root and branch thing earlier, and it takes something like the fact of grades. If you say to most people, literally having any graded system at all up to 16 is completely pointless. Just get rid of the whole thing. Everybody goes, whoa, 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 you can't say that. And you go, well, hang on a second, have you read the hundreds of studies that have been done on the fact of what grades actually do to intrinsic motivation in learning? They do 3 things. They narrow thinking, because you don't want to think outside the box if you want to actually just get the grade on offer. You do the bare minimum of what you actually need to do to get that grade, and once you've got the grade on offer, there's no point taking interest in the task after that, because there's no more grade left on offer, right? Grades have been shown to decrease intrinsic love of learning, and of course you're conditioning people to only do things if there's a goodie on offer. What's the point in doing something just because you love it? You need to do it for money, right? It's all about money. So it's perfect. It's the perfect cookie-cutting plant for a money-obsessed, self-obsessed, materialistic, junky consumption festival, which is what we're living with.
Don't hold back there, James. Now, Neal, you're gonna brighten our evening up here with a story about a country that's not doing that.
Yes, thank goodness there are people out there challenging exactly what James was talking about, because that is what the most of the world does to children. And James is absolutely right. Every single study shows that separating kids by ability and then testing them regularly just damages their outcome. Absolutely damages their outcome. And luckily, one country has taken this to the nth degree and are just chasing the dream. Finland. Finland's education system is amazing. They are at the top of every single measure you will ever find in education. Now, I guess generally people would think that's because they're doing longer hours, they're doing more homework, they're doing more tests. They're doing none of that stuff. All they're doing is saying there's no compulsory education until you're 7 years old. They give preschool to anyone who wants it, free of charge. Their school days are shorter than most. Their holidays are longer than most. They have very little homework. And how have they done this? They basically value teachers, would be one of the main things. You can only be a teacher in Finland if you are finished in the top 10% in the master's degree. So they are valued along the same level as lawyers and doctors. So you get people who are really passionate about teaching. So people want to get into teaching. And then when they get into the classroom, they basically let the kids do the learning. They do exactly what we've been talking about. They teach them to think. So, for example, in the West, in most classes, the teacher talks for between 80 to 85% of the time, and the kids 15% of interaction. It's flipped around the other way. In Finnish classes, 60% of the interaction is children. They do amazing stuff. So they do things like Nadine was talking about earlier about setting up businesses. They will encourage the kids to set up actual businesses. They will have 24-hour camps where like everyone in the school will sleep overnight, and they will put into groups and they'll come up with ideas, and they start actual businesses and they let them flow with it. So the evidence is out there, but right now we're not actually taking any notice of it in most countries in the world. Certainly not in Britain, most of Europe and America.
I think that's a fabulous example. I mean, there is green shoots here, Neal. I can share with you, and that is there's a school in Croxley that's come up with a concept of eco warriors, and those eco warriors are encouraged to find ways that the school can introduce eco initiatives which save the school money. I don't know much about that. I'm hoping that I'll be able to get a chance to go down and talk to the school on the TV show and
share the school's name. Well, we're online. Sorry, offline. Can I have the school's name?
Well, you see, they're in Croxley. I don't know exactly, but it's a school in Croxley. But they've already saved the school thousands and thousands because these kids are coming up with problem-solving concepts like to just save money, and it's been a real success. So they're not massive initiatives, but they're the start of perhaps reforms that would be a good thing to bring in everywhere. So Nadine, over to you. That's an interesting thing in Finland, isn't it? More of that, do you reckon?
Yeah, fantastic. And in fact, I've got a good news story as well, Neal, because I met with Oxley Early Years Children's Centre last week, and they were talking to me about how they try and make children more independent. So it's kind of a preschool, so ages 2 to 5, so they're really young children. But they do things like each child has got their own water bottle, which is one that they've brought in from home. It's got their name on it, and they're responsible for filling it up, making sure they know where it is, and they will always kind of go back to it at lunchtime and whatever. So they're responsible for that. It doesn't go in one box where the teacher hands them out, and that's only a really small thing. But they're small children, and they're really trying to foster that independence and self-reliance from a really early age. And I think there are teachers doing fantastic things, but they are, restrained within the system that measures them in a certain way. And unfortunately that's the system we're in. I'd love to see more of what they're doing in Finland, and I think, if we've got opportunities to help teachers do more of that, then we absolutely should. But I think there are already people doing some great stuff, and it's good to hear about it. We should share more of those stories and see what we can do to help them.
Fabulous. Yeah, I didn't know about that one, but thanks for sharing that with us. And we'll come on to league tables now. I mean, what is the purpose of the league table? Because obviously that was the whole fixation on league tables. I think it came in during the Blair years when there was a figure of, what was it, 47% of kids should be off to university, and I think the whole you know, I could never get my head around how every year we became cleverer and cleverer because we were passing more exams with higher grades and extra stars on the end of all the passes and stuff. I just couldn't quite work out what that was all about. But it's not about the kids, is it, James? Sarah?
Well, actually, I did a talk in Berlin recently on that study, and some of the highest scoring educational nations, I think, in terms of league tables. If we're talking about, let's talk about international league tables first. Have some of the unhappiest children in their society. I think literally the top ones. So you got Singapore and a few places like that, where South Korea, places like that were second from bottom and maybe even bottom in terms of childhood happiness. And then at the top you had, you know, some of the ones that were just in the middle or whatever. There was no correlation basically between childhood happiness and where those kids were on the league tables, because what they say is if you're doing higher on the league tables, then those kids are going to have more opportunities in life and they're going to be happier. But that just doesn't stand up to the evidence. It just doesn't. So what we're saying is it's not important that you're happy kids. It's important that you go out and get one of those jobs in which 80% of people say they hate them. Yeah, that's what's important. Your happiness isn't important. What's important is that you go out and you get yourselves in lots of debt, and that you carry on basically repaying that debt with interest applied that will never, ever, ever pay off, and be a good little slave and not question this lovely money-making operation that we've got going on here. So that would be my perspective. But backing off that more potentially contentious point, the main thing is that these league tables do not correlate with childhood happiness. That's just not true. So if it's not doing that, what's the bloody point?
Yeah, I mean, I just think this whole concept of school as it is today, it's not, you know, it's just not making, it's not a recipe for people having happiness. Not today, not in the system, and then not afterwards either, because you're carrying around this bag of debt and worry for the rest of your life. And if someone said to me, if someone said to me, right, Chris, what you do is you go along, you study hard, you get tested all the time, you're being pitted, student against student, some win, some lose, you get people who like hang themselves or whatever because they're just the pressure of everything is too high. You get a few people that are really good at studying in the way that the schools teach, and they go on to be egotistical maniacs. And then you've got all the people in the middle who could have done better but are going around saddled with low self-esteem because they never got the good grades they want for the rest of their lives. And you've got that conditioning going on, leading to a whole society which is a bit depressed on itself and just resigned to the fact that this is as good as it gets. I mean, what do you think, Neal? Is I know you've got some views on this, but I think this is what the tables do, isn't it? It just crushes them all.
Yeah, table league. It breeds competition in completely the wrong way. They're just in our whole society right now. There seems to be an other you have to be better than or compete with. And it just doesn't work. But unfortunately, the reason it's here is because it sounds good to someone who doesn't look at evidence and critically think stuff through. Because I understand completely why a parent wants their kid to go to the best school. I would much rather have a system like Finland where all the schools are exactly equal, so there is no best school as such. But under our current system, the league tables provide a thing that parents can look at and say, this is the best school for my child. All the evidence says that doesn't stack up. Most of these schools that have good results under the league table, they only have good results because the better educated parents know how to play the game to get their kids into a certain school. Yet the evidence also shows if that child with that ability went to another school, their outcome would be just as good. It's it's a game. It's a game. It's completely has no basis in any reality whatsoever. The league tables, unfortunately.
So I mean, you said there parents want their kids to go to the best schools. Wouldn't a parent really want their kid to be happy?
Well, yeah. Well, what we're what we sold is happy with. That's a whole different program, isn't it? But yeah, you're right. You're absolutely right. But we're told that happiness is making sure you get this grade by this time, making sure you can leave school with this thing, make sure you do this.
I mean, this is a bit of a like a bit of a depressing thing to say, but when children go through massive depression, and some unfortunately, and suicide in the 18 to 21-year-olds is the highest increase in suicide rates at the moment in the country. When kids are being driven to that desperation, that isn't happy for the parents either, but it's the system that's actually kind of making them think that that's the way we need to behave with our kids. And it's just, I mean, I'm not going to ask you your age, Nadine, but yeah, you must have been caught up in this grades thing a little bit. I mean, I went to Watford Grammar School. There was pressure, but to be honest, my whole experience of Watford Grammar was I was just going to do enough to get the grades. And to be honest, fortunately for me, I didn't have to do very much. But you must have been wrapped up. How was it for you?
Yeah, lucky you, Chris. Yeah, I guess I was, and interestingly, so I didn't do particularly well at university, so I failed a year, and that was one of the hardest and best development opportunities for me. So I got to a point where I had to decide, was I going to stay at university, and work for a year while I retook my modules and get a full-time job to pay for that because I wouldn't get a loan? Was I going to drop out completely? Was I going to try and change university? And actually going through that process was just absolutely amazing development for me, having to sit down and have the awkward conversations with parents, ask for a bit of extra support. And that was probably one of the best things that's happened to me. And I worked, I ended up staying, I worked through it. But the reason I failed was because I was doing a lot of the extracurricular stuff that we talked about earlier, so the passion. So I was really heavily involved in student politics. And that's given me, some of the best skills that I think I have now. So I was managing budgets, I was working with lots of different stakeholders, I was influencing people, and those are the things that are useful to me in my job now. So actually the fact that I didn't do particularly well at my degree has never been an issue for me. And actually some of my most successful friends now are the ones that got the worst grades at university, because it's their personal skills. And I think that the good thing that a grade gives you is it's an entry point to something. So, getting good GCSEs allows you to take your A-levels, getting good A-levels allows you to get to university, which allows you an entry point to a job. And that's really what it's good for me. But, some of the people with the best grades to not necessarily have the personal skills to get the jobs that they necessarily wanted to get after university. And, you're absolutely right, Neal, when we say we people are going into these jobs that they then believe are going to be the best jobs and not necessarily happy with the jobs that they've got after that. So for me, it's about getting, and I talked about it earlier, getting people to explore the life balance part of work-life balance and, all throughout life, so school life balance, whatever that means, and getting people to explore the things that they're passionate about. Because, when I was involved in the student politics, that was by far the most I've ever learned, and I've probably never learned that amount since, because of the people that I was working with were so dynamic and all of those different situations that I was put in. So for me, the grade thing's really difficult because actually, again, we live in a system, and I guess it's the same debate that we have with performance management in business. A lot of people argue that we shouldn't have performance management in business in the way that we do now, where we give people gradings or ratings or whatever you want to call them, and we manage people against each other like that. So that's a really hot debate in the business world, and then there are companies who totally eradicated the kind of scale of ratings, and now they just give people feedback. So that's kind of at early stages, a lot of businesses moving to that model. But I think it's the same debate, and businesses are now starting to say, well, actually, maybe the ratings don't work. So I think it'd be really interesting over the next couple of years to see how those businesses find the performance of their business goes when they've changed the performance of their staff. But for me, as a personal experience, I don't think it's the grade that matters once you're in somewhere. But unfortunately, that's the thing that gets you in.
Yeah, I mean, so not big need for calculus at the bank there.
No, I have to say, I'm all about the Excel spreadsheet. A formula can do what my brain doesn't need to.
Yeah, so yeah, I mean that's interesting. You bringing it back to business there, and obviously the same problems exist in business and measurement. I mean, there was I can't remember exactly. Maybe I'll dig it out for a future discussion, but where they basically did an experiment where they basically paid people more money for doing more work, and in the end the whole experiment just collapsed on itself because people, when they're put under pressure, actually what's important is nothing to do with what they're doing, the job necessarily, that job of work, but actually what they're passionate about. And it's interesting to hear you talking about the extracurricular activities, because they're by far and away probably where you learn, as you say, where you learn all the stuff because you were really interested in it, and actually the subject you went to study wasn't perhaps as interesting as the stuff that you were doing at.
Yeah, not at the time. It didn't seem like it anyway.
Interesting. So, I mean, we've got a system here then, James, that's creating competition at an early age in schools. It's creating winners and losers, which obviously has got ramifications, because one of the things that I'm very keen on is actually helping people to think about the way they feel about themselves. And obviously what we're doing here is we're developing a few people who've really got the self-confidence, and the trouble is it gets to be egotistical because they basically beat all their competition at school and they go on to do whatever they do. But the vast majority of the students coming out are feeling pretty depressed about what they've done. Even if they were middle of the road, it's just not quite good enough, and they just then go out of school. The system's let them down, hasn't it, at that point?
Well, yeah, it's basically taught them that their happiness is conditional. You have to be given a license to be happy. You know, you're given a grade to be happy. You can't be happy on your own terms. You can't feel like you did well and because of of whatever. I mean, for instance, something that's interesting about the grades, it's not just grades, it's praise. Even giving kids praise, people go, well, what's wrong with praise? Well, because then the praise becomes the reward. Is that, for instance, I play drums and I write music. No one ever forced me to do it. I did it because I love it. And people didn't come right. I didn't do it because someone came up to me and went, oh, good boy, James, well done. They didn't come into it. I did it because I wanted to do it. And this is coming back to what you were saying about the workplace motivation and things and what businesses are looking into. I'd highly recommend a book by Daniel Pink called Drive.
Daniel Pink, he's a good guy, Daniel Pink, yeah.
And that goes through some of the case studies that you were talking about, where for laborious labour, if you want higher output, then you pay more money. But if you want someone to solve a creative problem, the more money you actually give, it makes it worse. The person's focused on the money and rather than solving the problem. So coming back to competition, there's another good book which I've seen a couple of talks on, but I haven't actually read, I must confess. But if it's anything like the other many books I've read by this author, then I highly recommend it. The Case Against Competition. And that's written by a guy called L4GTV, who has written extensively about the problems with regards to education, with everything from grades and praise and punishment that I've mentioned already, homework myth, the idea that homework correlates to higher grades and those sorts of things. He's a very, very good, I think possibly the most prolific researcher on education that I know of, L4GTV. So yeah, I'd recommend him doing that. But that's what competition creates, right? It creates, you can only ever be the one person who won, and then you'll be the person that loses. So you're doing it for the winning, and not doing it because it's what you actually want to do and what's true to you.
I know that Neal will have something to say about this, but what you described there was looking out at what everybody else is doing and comparing against what everyone else is up to, rather than trying to be better than you were yesterday, which is about internalizing your improvement. And that's not based on praise. And my analogy for this was, I play table tennis. I play table tennis at county level, but when I started playing table tennis, I wanted my parents to be happy and to see me improving. But there got to be a point when I was like 13, when I was playing table tennis because I wanted to be better. And it got nothing to do with my parents, but I'd gone from trying to please somebody else to the point where I wanted to be better for me. And that's what drove me to practice more and more. But internalising things, Neal, this is really important, and it's nothing like what's taught at school, is it?
Yeah, this is a big passion of mine, actually. Our whole system, this is way outside school. It's way outside everything. We don't teach children to internalise stuff. I'm going to go off track just for a few seconds. So I've set up something called the Kindness Project. I've been reading a lot of research lately, and this goes to what James was saying exactly about teaching children to internalise stuff. So if a child does a really kind act, what will generally happen is a parent or an adult will praise them, and the praise becomes the reward, or they may even get a little sweet or even a present. And that becomes the reward. So they're actually doing that act of kindness for the reward. Whereas if you teach a child to actually enjoy doing that act of kindness, by, for example, saying something like, well, that was really nice of you to do that. How did that make you feel? They internalize it and they start to love the feeling of being kind. So they do it more, which spreads to everyone else. Now, I think that relates exactly to the learning process. I think we can use exactly that same tool in the learning progress, rather than praise or a gold star or look, mummy, I've got a letter from school, aren't I great? That sort of thing needs to be developed in the school just to make kids love learning, really appreciate and really enjoy it.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with you, because by rewarding kindness, what you're essentially doing subliminally with anybody is basically saying, if you do this, you'll get that. Well, that's capitalism, isn't it? That's chasing the money, chasing the reward, chasing that, and in turn that. So it takes it away from being kind. Actually, people only do things if they're going to get some money for it, or do something if they're going to get some measure of reward. So what do you think then, Nadine? That's quite an interesting one, isn't it? And it's a fascinating project, by the way, and something I'm wholeheartedly behind, as you would probably imagine. But interesting, isn't it?
Absolutely, and it sounds great, and I think the big thing for me is, I'm learning as I go that the more you put in, the more you get out, and like you were talking about earlier with grades, you only put in as much as you need to get what you need to get, and actually, with the Kindness Project, with everything else, the more you put into anything, a relationship, whether that's a friendship, a romance, whatever it might be, the more you're going to get out. And I think that's what we need to start teaching children. But also we need to work in passions to the everyday, so we need to make sure that they're enjoying what they're learning. And actually, if it's not that book, well then what is it? And we need to give that flexibility to allow children to discover what they love and teach them that the more they put in, the more they get out. And I think they will start to build when they start to enjoy something. They will want to put more in, and it becomes a perpetuating cycle whereby they want to learn and they want to do more. And that for me is the big thing. And I guess it links into what Neal was saying, is the more we can build those skills, the more we get out of them. But this isn't just about the schools. This is about what we're teaching at home. This is about what we're teaching in our whole culture. And we can't just rely on the teachers for that. It isn't fair to say that is the responsibility of the teachers in the school. you know, we've all got a responsibility, whether we're parents, friends, you know, aunties, uncles, you know, everybody has a responsibility to be teaching that in others.
Yeah, I mean, we're going to wrap it up in a second, but you're absolutely right, Nadine. I mean, none of this stuff that we're talking about week in, week out can be dealt with in isolation. The whole thing is interconnected, and of course, that's why the internet is such an important element in all of this, because it enables everything to be interconnected. But you know, like if we've got the schools like they are, it's no good the schools being fixed if the stuff that happens after schools not getting some kind of development as well. But what if we were going to do something in the schools fairly quickly and a bit radical, James and Sarah? What way do you think we would start? Give us something that you think, if we could implement it, would make a big difference, or at least take us down some way down the path.
Take a few leaps out of the democratic school models book and do it fast.
Yeah.
So a case study school that you should all check out, I thoroughly recommend it, is Summerhill School, the first democratic school set up in 1921 in this country. The kids at the school don't have to go to lessons if they don't want to. They can play all day if they like, and they decide on the rules with the teachers. They have an equal voice with the teachers. They have 2 to 3 democratic meetings a week where they decide together what the rules of the school will be. But one rule that never changes: every child in that school has the right to not go to a lesson, even one lesson if they don't want to. Now, this always throws up some really interesting things, this school, because people go, well, they won't learn anything. And obviously the government hated them, so they tried to shut them down in 1997. When it went to court, the lawyer basically said, well, how would you like us to judge Summerhill then? And they said, well, how about their GCSE results? Went, fine, no problem. In the last 2 to 3 years, they have passed out at above the state average, so they're better than you. Even though they didn't have to be, they were still better than you. So it's like, you know, even by your own metric of standards, they beat you. And, of course, the kids are happy, they're articulate, they're well-mannered, they critically think, they're more adult than most adults I know. You know, and they know what they love. They know, and they love learning. And, of course, it changes the relationship, because when you walk in that classroom, the onus is on the teacher to make the subject interesting. It's not a prison cell where the child has to be there. It's a case of the relationship is, oh no, you better make this lesson interesting, because if you don't, that kid's just turning around and walking out. They're not going to be there. And I recognise that this is a small school. It's maybe 100 kids or so, but somehow getting those principles into schools, you know, because we have like a school council in like these schools. It's pathetic. The kids see straight through it. My daughter and her friends are like school council. What are we talking about? At the end of it, they go, oh, that's a nice idea, kids, and we'll just go back to Nazism. Because school is a dictatorship. It's not a democracy. There's no democracy about it. And then they come out into the world, and you know, and we say, this is a democracy, kids. Of course it's not a democracy. You know, you taught them how to be in a dictatorship and amongst their peers. Another thing is, it's worth mentioning, if I may, is that the way human beings have always grown up in the past is in tribes, surrounded by their grandparents and their close relatives and things. Now what do? We segregate them into their age groups so that they become completely peer-orientated. So all that they're actually bothered about is their image and their exterior, like you were talking about internalization. So all they do now is they worry about what they look like to all their peers, because they're obsessed with it, rather than actually having a connection with their family and their community and being active participants in their community. How the hell, being in a school all day long, are you active in your community? What are you talking about? You're nowhere near it. You're in a prison cell all day long. There's no joined up thinking there, you know. And like you were saying, many of the people who were successful in this world started to do it because they left school, and they basically, you know, didn't have much of a kind word to say about it. whether that goes for Albert Einstein or Thomas Jefferson or Ben Franklin or all these sorts of people were running successful businesses by the time they were 13, 14, because that's the age that you should actually go out and start to meet the world a little bit and actually put your feet out there and see what's going on. But we're talking about setting up businesses, and it's precisely what school doesn't do. So I don't think that was a concrete answer on where to get started.
It was interesting anyway. Some of that was said there that I know, which is basically that kids don't have to go to school or not. Same argument used for the minimum wage. We won't go down there at the moment, Neil, but people say, well, if you pay people anyway, they don't have to work. They'll all just sit on their backsides all day and do nothing. But of course, we know through what you just said there with that school there, James, that isn't actually the case. What people do is they find something that they're interested in. But Neil, what do you reckon we can do? Do something like they're doing in Finland? I mean, have we got a chance of doing something like that, or is there something else we can do?
Well, I would say let's just follow the evidence. Let's take education out of politics completely and utterly. Let's get rid of dogma, and let's have top level, and they just follow the evidence. That's all you need to do. It's pretty simple, actually, to tell the truth.
I'm sorry to cut in. I'm going to take Neil's answer rather than my really long rant. Okay.
Oh, thank you. I liked your rant. I loved your rant. But once we've done that, let's please make sure third world countries do the same, because the way we are going to save humanity is by educating women and children in third world countries. So please, let's not send them down the route we've taken. Let them have evidence-based education as well.
Well, I think with the internet and making that available, we have the opportunity to perhaps do that because they'll learn through collaboration and connecting with other people, which will be different to our experience in the developed world. So hopefully they'll use those tools, and the presence of those tools will enable that to happen. Nadine.
Hello. I absolutely loved that school. I'm Googling in the background. I'm going to go and have a proper read of that at some point. But I'd say I'm one of these people that loved school. I love everything, you know, and I really did enjoy school. And for me, I think the one thing that we need to build in is choice, you know, so possibly not as extreme as, you know, giving every child the decision about whether or not they can go to school. I don't think that's going to happen tomorrow, but I think moving to a world where they have more choice about what they do and allowing them to make decisions and understanding the impact of those decisions and getting to decide what they like and don't like and going with that, for me, is really important. I think that's the thing that we can do, and we can start small and we can build it up, you know, to a point where we get to maybe Finland. Who knows?
Fabulous. All right, well, so we're going to wrap it up now. We've probably gone a little bit over the hour, but I thoroughly enjoyed tonight's discussion. I want to thank you all for participating so enthusiastically. It's been brilliant. So just say cheerio now. So thanks for joining us, James and Sarah, and hopefully see you soon.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you very much for having us. I really enjoyed it.
And by the way, you can go and visit Summerhill. They've got open days.
Fab.
Yeah, I thoroughly recommend actually going to the school and seeing it firsthand.
It changes completely what you think about it.
Yeah.
We had an idea, but then we went there, and so clearly we were like, wow, amazed.
Fabulous. Thanks for joining us, Neil.
Thank you. It's been great as always.
Fabulous, thanks. And Nadine, a big thank you for you for joining us. It's been really good, and thank you for your contribution.
Brilliant, no problem. See you later, Chris.
All right, take care now. So that's it. The show's over. Thanks for watching. Really interesting one. Next week we start a run of 3 weeks on health and wellness. There's such a massive topic there, but like education, it's an area which is fraught with all sorts of challenges. So join us next week. We'll be kicking off with health and wellness part 1. See you all then. So cheerio for now.